Hello, my name is Sarah Strange, and I'm happy to give you this short presentation today about the latest exhibition at the Fashion and Lace Museum. Normally, on the first Sunday of the month, the museum entry is free and a guided tour is provided. Now, you can imagine in these difficult COVID times that we, the guides, are a little frustrated we're not able to do this. So this webinar has been put forward as a compromise situation so that you can see what this very interesting and unusual exhibition has to offer. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is that the theme of this exhibition is unusual. It's the first time that we have featured the male wardrobe in all its glory, if you like. It's not a popular theme, it's rarely designed in this way, and that's why it was decided that the Fashion and Lace Museum would do something a bit different. As you will see as we go through the various themes, there are all sorts of forms of the male wardrobe, and they reflect not only different periods, but different styles, different behaviors, because clothes, as we know, reflect the times in which they are worn. Now, before I start this webinar for real, you can see we have the presentation of one of the sections here in front of you. I'd just like to say that there will be a question and answer session. If you have questions, you can put them, there's a button you can press and I can answer them at the end. The other thing is that the museum exhibition is open from Tuesdays for the weekend. And it's open until the 13th of June this year. So if you like what you see, you can come and visit us. So really what we're doing here, we're going to start about the time of the French Revolution, although this isn't really a historical visit. And we will go right up to the present day. One last thing, it's called the Fashion and Lace Museum, but a couple of years ago it had a different name. It was called the Costume and Lace Museum. And so therefore this is the same place. It's always trying to update its themes. I'd like to start with this nice three-piece suit. It's not, of course, the three-piece suit you would expect to see on a man today, but it has the basic qualities of the suit. We have a waistcoat here with lots of buttons, as you can see, a very smart jacket, but none of the buttons can be done up, and knee breeches. Now, the knee breeches are going to go out of fashion at the end of the 18th century with the development of the Enlightenment and the smarter ideas of the more practical way of behaving, with the decline at the time of the French Revolution and the aristocracy in general. This particular suit, as you see, it's clearly indicated, it's anonymous. That is to say, we don't know who made it. The idea of a designer or a haute couture is a long way into the future, and clothes were always made to measure for individuals. This one, which is an interesting item, is in fluted silk, and you see it has little blue flowers everywhere. The buttons are covered in the same fabric. And because we can't really show you somebody wearing it, I want you to use your imagination. The gentleman who would be wearing this would be a member of the aristocratic class. He certainly wouldn't be working. He would have below his breeches here, he would have a very nice pair of silk stockings, probably white or beige, with buckle shoes. And of course, he would have lace, which is one of the great traditions here in Belgium, around the cuffs and around the collar, and the powdered wig with probably a ribbon. So this is the atmosphere of the court of Louis XVI. Now, in England at the same time, we have a much more pragmatic king and a different way of seeing things. And as the century begins to change, styles begin to change as well. So let's see what happens to those knee breeches. One last thing, the French call them culottes, and the sans-culotte, where everybody except the aristocracy. So I'm going to show you an example of one of these people. Here we have a painting by Chénard. Simon Chénard was a singer who came around about the time of the French Revolution. You'll see he's wearing what we would now call trousers, recognizably. The front done up at the side. We don't have zips for a very long time to come. There is, of course, still the waistcoat and a very loose scarf or foulard around the thing. The difference between the rich and the poor, the aristocracy and everybody else, was clearly defined in terms of clothing, and brilliantly depicted in the satirical novel, of course, by Thackeray, A Tale of Two Cities. So we can imagine here, this is a much more easy garment to wear and much more, allows more movement and is altogether the sign of things to come. Of course, trousers, I just mentioned the trousers here. Trousers are coming in as a much more comfortable way of attire. The little boy here, Louis Joseph, is one of the sons of Marie Antoinette, the famous painting here by Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun. And of course, it's still in very expensive material, in silk, as you can see. There's a sash, and of course, the ubiquitous lace, which was still very predominant and only disappeared at the time of the French Revolution. Napoleon tried to bring it back, but it didn't really function very well. We're not really talking much about the ladies here, but it is important to notice that the boy has a little bit more freedom of movement, where his older sister here will still be encumbered with petticoats and silks and sashes until the 20th century. So there is a certain amount of freedom and comfort which is involved at this time. Now I'm going to jump forward. Now this is something you probably recognize. We have here a three-piece suit, but let us consider the various possibilities. The idea of a man being a peacock, a man with rich clothes, showing off his style, is sort of disintegrating. And by the time we get to the latter part of the 19th century, the male costume has undergone what we call the Great Renunciation. The idea being that the woman still has her beautiful colors and gets her clothes from Paris, and generally is the main line of attraction, whereas the man, in terms of his dress, is somewhat more subdued, and therefore he goes very much for, again, the three-piece suit, but in much quieter colors, possibly a little bit of color in the tie, but not always. So this three-piece suit, let's have a look at it. It has a shorter jacket than the waistcoat we've seen at the earlier costume, shorter sleeves, much more fitting wide lapels, it's probably a little fob watch here, and trousers with the crease. Because of course now men are going to wear trousers. And I just mentioned that because even in America, the first president in America to wear trousers rather than breeches was Madison at the beginning of the 19th century. So here we have a much more comfortable fit, but again, much more discreet. Wanamaker's was a large department store which opened in Philadelphia in 1861, and was, again, at this time we have the advent of the sewing machine and industrialization, the bourgeois ethic and so on, and so these were the first garments which actually had a price tag on. You could actually choose, they were not so much made to measure. Let's go forward again. We now of course have the three-piece suit again, but there's a little difference. Have you noticed? We don't have the tailcoat. There's a story attached to that. This is what the English call the dinner jacket, what the French like to call le smoking, and the Americans call the tuxedo. But technically speaking, the tuxedo was a white jacket, named after a place in the Hudson Bay Valley where the elite of New York used to congregate in the 1880s. At this time, we have in England the Prince of Wales, the future Edward VII, who used to complain that why should I wear a suit with tails when I'm eating on my own? And so the tailor very obligingly cut it off and made things much more comfortable for him. So again, Edward VII to be was a little bit of a trendsetter. I want to jump forward again because the emphasis is very much on the influences on the man's costume. We have again the man's suit. Very nice suit here, made to measure. Wetherell's is a bespoke tailor in the most famous street for men's tailoring in London's Savile Row, built on the Burlington estate at the beginning of the 18th century. It was named after the wife of the third Earl of Burlington, whose name was Savile. Dorothy Savile. Influenced very much, the Savile Row was by a very famous dandy, in fact, the dandy of all dandies, if I could say, Beau Brummell. Beau Brummell, who was of middle class background, but who frequented the nobility and made a friend of the Prince Regent, had started his own much more fitted, stylish clothes and convinced the tailors of Savile Row to follow his designs. As an exchange, they gave him some of his clothes to promote. So very much important there. So what we have here, let's have a look at this particular pair. We have, of course, the zip front trousers, of course, and it's a three-piece suit. Notice that the differences are things to do with how many buttons we have on the waistcoat, how fitted it is, the flat pockets, the small pocket to put your pen in and put the buttonhole in. The only bit that really is interesting is the fact that here, although we have a very plain shirt, we have a flamboyant tie. And the great thing about the tie was Oscar Wilde said, if you want to make a dash, you have to wear a tie. It's where you begin with fashion, how you start. So the tie is one of the few ways in which the man shows a little bit of enterprise in this era of the dark suit. Now, we go forward to the 1970s, a bit more interesting here. Whereas the garment before had very much the pinstripe, which was very, very thin lines, the slightly wider stripe is known as the chalk stripe. We still have our friend the waistcoat and another flamboyant tie, but what is changing here, it's a much looser fit, and we have the much bigger reveres here with the bigger pockets. And of course, the 1970s is synonymous with flares. The wider trousers very much date that. If you see films of the period, you can always date it immediately. Hepworth's was a very big men's department store in the 19th century, which started being ready to wear clothes at the end of the century and was taken over in 1989 by the high street name Next. We will now go forward, and we're now going to change from English tailoring, because I think it's about time we presented our Italian friends. Giorgio Armani opened his own boutique and shop in Milan in 1975. And here you can see there are a couple of very interesting things, a different color of the cloth which is used. Again, the very wide lapels and well-fitted shoulders, but much more relaxed than the earlier items we've seen. And of course, we have the double-breasted suit. Makes you think of the 1930s, gangland America and so on, because fashion is forever changing. A thing is coming back into fashion and going out of fashion. So Armani was the last word in clothes. He also made clothes for women. And one last thing to mention about him is this interesting pattern. We have a pattern shirt with a pattern tie. Now, before this time, this was not at all popular, but now we've decided to experiment with designs and patterns. Let's go to the Far East. Yoshi Yamamoto is a Japanese designer, couturier, who trained in Tokyo but came to Paris. And here we have a very different approach to the suit. First of all, we can see, let's look at the buttons. We have much narrower trousers here, huge pockets. You can put tools in there. It's almost like a workman's overall top, and a very useful place to put in your mobile phone or measuring tape, something like that. Very much relaxed. But the interesting feature of this outfit, first time we've seen not something fitted at the waist, but a drawstring, so to fit all sizes, but still keeping very much to this dark colors, which we are traditionally expecting to see from men's clothes. He was also famous for designing costumes for the stage and for films. This is an interesting one. This is our first Belgian designer in this group, working for Lanvin, Lucas Ossendrijver, and you see how recent it is, only 2013. Now we have what I would have called the drain pope trousers, so the flares have completely disappeared. Very large buttons on the very simple jacket, the thin little tie here, and the plain white shirt. If you think a little bit about it, this might be a reminder of an earlier period, the 1960s. And in fact, this is why we've picked the next design to show you. an interesting scene here from London of the swinging 60s. So we have here a young gentleman wearing what we would call an Italian style suit, perhaps not a wealthy man, but somebody from the working class who's making good. And he has a tie and shirt and is very smart. And he goes around with his lambretta here with all his bells and whistles all over it. In complete contrast, the gentleman behind, who is in very relaxed mode. It's the time of the Beatles and the special mod haircut here. Mod for modernist, by the way. And the rockers, the people who wore the leather jackets and the bright colors. He's wearing a red top here, quite a different style. It's after the depression of the Second World War and the deprivations, the departure of people from the national service is no longer required. It's a time of optimism, hedonism, and fashion is definitely not Paris. Fashion is swinging London. Here we see such a good example. The girls wearing the fashionable clothes, even the little suit with the small buttons and the berry. And of course, you think immediately of people like 𝘊𝘊𝘊𝘋. And we mustn't forget the ladies, because I may have some ladies listening to me today. We have here a design by a famous Belgian designer, Martin Margiela. And look, it's only 15 years ago. It's a recent one. It's a suit for a woman. So we would call this a trouser suit. Initially instigated by Yves Saint Laurent in the 1960s, women took time to be accepted in trouser suits, but now they are all over the place. What has he done here, Margiela? He has taken a man's suit, as we can see here. We only have half of it. And we have a man's pair of trousers from the other side. It's very asymmetrical. And on the right-hand side, we have a shawled over collar, low sleeve, and an asymmetrical front with cutaway trousers. Perhaps not everyone would go for this style, but it does show that with clothing, with men and female clothing, there is always room for change. Now we're going to a different section, so we forget all about the suit. And now we're going to go for man as the adventurer, when he wants what he's doing when he's not working. Jean-Paul Gaultier, of course, comes immediately to mind, always promoting provocative male costume and design. First on the scene in the 1980s. Here we have a costume he designed, and I do say costume, not suit, because it is for a ballet. And as we see on one side, we have his signature T-shirt or jersey with the horizontal stripes. Again, you'll notice that the almost bell-bottom trousers, because it's for a sailor. And the frontage here, I don't know if you remember what I showed you with the man in 1792, but we have the special trapezoidal front opening here. These are known as punt pants. And on the back, as the dancer turns round, we have this stretched jersey tulle with all these incredible patterns made to look like tattoos. Well, tattoos, of course, have been with us forever. They're found in mummies in tombs and various things, and of course, always in the sailor and merchant class. But nowadays, you can have them everywhere, except, of course, with COVID, the tattoo parlors are closed. But the idea being that the dancer here would do, Jean-Paul Gaultier has always promoted masculinity. He's always an agent provocateur in terms of style. And we'll meet him at different places throughout this exhibition. So apart from the sailor, we have, how about a mountaineer? Now, of course, they often say you can judge somebody by their shoes or footwear, especially at interviews. I'm not sure what you'd feel about these. Are more like mountain boots. Very interesting cutaway heels here, heavy stitching, and this climbing suggests sort of a climbing rope, bungee cord for climbing. So again, mountaineering boots. We would call them heavy duty boots, but they are also used for leisure wear. Now, this gives me an opportunity to mention a very important facet in Belgian design in terms of fashion, which is the Antwerp Six. The Antwerp Six were a group of students who qualified from the Antwerp fashion house in Antwerp, and they hired a van in 1986, all six of them, and took part in the fashion show in London Fashion Show. And the English journalists who were covering the event found their names, as you can see here, not too easy for an English person, rather difficult to pronounce, so they just grouped them together as the Antwerp Six. They went for radical new fashion, and now they are a stable member of our fashion design. Different thing here, we now have an Austrian designer who rethought a lot of jackets and trousers and coats. 𝘊𝘕𝘊𝘌𝘋 here has made a zip-up jacket, which may make you think of the cafe racers, this culture of rockers going around. A comment, incidentally, on the zip, which I mentioned earlier. It was actually designed in America in 1894, used to close money bags, but now, of course, it's a well-known fashion item. And here's the first one we have with pockets with zips. And of course, we have some interesting features here because this is very avant-garde. We have a t-shirt with the word cowboy written backwards, and all these straps here, which might suggest possibly parachuting. So there's again an emphasis of the action man, the different style. And in the last one in this action section, this comes from the Pirate collection of Vivienne Westwood and her partner in crime, as it were, Malcolm McLaren, who was the impresario working for the Sex Pistols at the beginning of the 1980s. To give you an idea of how this would have fitted in the style, this is sort of the punk come neo-romantic style. So here we have again the waistcoat, as you can see, with the buttons and the high neck, which would make you think again of Regency dandy style. Clashing patterns for the striped jacket here. You'll notice that this particular pop group, which was in fashion from 77 to 82, shows very much this attachment to historical styles here. The special, the straps and the gold, and again, she's used these khaki and green slides. So very much using this historical style. She sort of founded the punk rock movement, the punk style, and again, the neo-romantic movement. So a very important person. She's still with us, but Malcolm McLaren died recently. Now, I think we'll go upstairs. On the first floor of the exhibition, we have a new theme. This one is men in skirts, or rather in this case, men in a dress. Rick Owens, who's lending us this wonderful outfit today, very recent, as you can see, 2012, not a very practical color white, a nice jacket again with padded shoulders and long sleeves, and a dress which falls in sculptural folds. Very much the idea of a man in the dress. I'm not too sure this has been totally accepted, but if we take the historical point of view, men have always worn long tunics, long djellabas, kimonos and so on. It's only at the end of the Middle Ages that men start wearing shorter hose and doublet and hose, and you can see their legs much more. So the idea is to bring back the idea of a man in a skirt or a man in a dress, and this seemed a rather dramatic way of putting this forward. You'll notice also the designer has lent us some glasses, a bit like the Ray-Ban glasses, which you can see in all the shops. Did you know these were invented for pilots for 1937 and brought over to Europe with the GIs at the end of the Second World War? All these little features have their interesting side. If we're talking about a man in a skirt, well, what comes to mind? Obviously the kilt. The kilt, I'll show you what the real kilt looks like. Here it is. You'll notice the original kilt was a form of uniform from the Scots, but it is in fact originally from Scandinavia since the 14th century and used very much also in Ireland and Scotland as national dress. Worn in the Highlands, it's made up of 6 or 7 meters of cloth and can be taken apart and used to wrap on and cover you up. It represents which clan or which family you belong to and has a lot of political significance, which is lost in the version by Dries here when he's playing with 2 different types of tartans, and he's put a little t-shirt underneath which says loves underneath. So we have the pattern t-shirt coming into fashion. Much less fabric is used, of course, for this particular kilt, and the cargo pocket with the bucket, with the pocket with the button on it underneath. So they're very different. But over here, we have the idea that this became a political football, if you like, and the clans were banned from wearing their kilts after the fall of the Stuarts in the middle of the 18th century, and only when the law was repealed were they allowed to develop their kilts again. And nowadays we have about 150 new designs every year, and there are over 7,000 in existence. So please don't ask me which particular clan this belongs to. But it's a very masculine outfit, not at all effeminate, quite different from the version that 𝘊𝘕𝘕𝘌𝘊𝘛𝘌𝘋, who's also one of the Antwerp Six, incidentally, has designed here. Another form of skirt, well, the stripe should give it away. It is, of course, Jean-Paul Gaultier again. And in front we have, from his collection, And God Created Man, a sort of cafe apron. So at the back, we have trousers here. And in the front, it's one panel, makes it look like a skirt. So this was also made for films and production, very honored from the 1980s. So this is almost like a culotte skirt, a different style again, but perfectly acceptable and not unusual, and doesn't even shock us these days, does it? And I want a change of scene altogether, because this whole exhibition is devoted to various themes around male dress. This is another Belgian designer, the three-piece ensemble with the tie. Now this theme is called the dandy. The dandy, which is a concept really that came into being in the end of the 18th century, personified particularly, of course, by Beau Brummel, also by the aesthetic movement led by Oscar Wilde. It's a man who wants to remain elegant but understated and a little bit in his slightly out of tune with the fashions of the moment. He wants a sort of understated, permanent elegance, which is the aim of also of people like Brummel. He wanted things to be elegant but understated. If you're stared at, then you've gone too far. So this is an attempt, I believe, to look rather like the style worn by someone called Charles Baudelaire, who was a famous French poet who spent a couple of years here in Brussels in the 19th century. And the feature that is most important, apart from the coat, the original one would have been in wool, dark trousers, is the nonchalant way in which he has knotted his cravat. The very important, the casual way, always keeping a certain style and flair, which was perhaps not traditional for other people with their long ties. So again, slightly at odds with the fashion of the moment. Another member of the Antwerp Six to present. This is the house of Anne de Meulemeester, another difficult name for us to say. And here, we have stop on this one a bit. We have a very nice leather jacket with a shirt underneath with a plastron front, what we call a dicky front. And here we have, because it is the Fashion and Lace Museum, one example of lace. It is mechanical lace here, and it is on the shirt underneath. Gives me an opportunity to remind you that, of course, lace was big business in Belgium for several hundred years. It's now more of a hobby item, but mechanical lace has taken its place. But this, of course, goes back to our first item, which was the gentleman from the French Revolution. So a little reminder here of the lace, which is very beautiful, isn't it? And of course, we're talking about showcasing Belgian designers. So we also have the School of Fashion at 𝘊𝘖𝘕𝘕𝘌𝘊𝘛𝘌𝘋. And this is a third-year student. We've got several students shown in this exhibition. We've chosen this one. In the third year of their course, they're asked to design something in the style of a men's collection on the dandy. So what this lady has done is experiment with, again, the man's long coat, the very, very long tie. It's got little sparkly bits in it, if you can just see that. And the interesting way that she's made the revers here, they're in a sort of satin effect and a shawl effect, quite different. Again, it's playing with the codes and experimenting with new designs. Very attractive, clever use of color, and very elegant, and again, unique. So the museum is very proud to have certain of these items either loaned or given to the museum to increase its collections. A new field here. That man, of course, has been the adventurer, he's the provider, but of course he's entitled to have his own emotions, his own feelings, the softer side, if you like. So this is a theme called Boys Don't Cry, and it comes from a song, actually, by The Cure, a pop song, and it was used for this collection by Hedi Slimane, who worked for Dior. So if we look carefully at this one, we'll see how fragile the outfit is compared to some of the earlier ones. Very slinky material, although very heavy shoes here, and very thin tie again. The tie changes width throughout, which is one of these items that varies a great deal. A plain white shirt, well, not exactly, because here they've kindly given us an enlargement, and you'll see this particular white shirt has got all sorts of beading all over it to suggest emotions. Now, if the man is in a meeting, he can do the shirt up. If not, he can show his more vulnerable side. Another one here, another two-piece suit. The waistcoat is completely absent here. And here we have a man wearing a necklace, which is actually handcuffs, all joined together, made of stainless steel. But the interesting facet here, again, the very simple trousers, the slimpy fabric, slightly more adolescent, fragile side to the man. And if you look closely, but it's easier if you see it at the exhibition, you'll see a little drawing underneath here. It's almost like a nostalgia, reminding people of the past. I have feelings too, kind of thing. But the emphasis very much here, always on the dark colors. So we have still this slightly more softer version of the man. And of course, here we have a reminder of a completely different style. If you've heard of Jackson Pollock, you will know that he started this experimental design, abstract art. He would take paint and he would use a bucket and make it go in any direction. It's just depending on how he felt. So this is a pair of sort of Indian ink stained trousers with the drawstring, incidentally, also. Very comfortable to wear. And he's chosen as a top an almost transparent tank top with ribbed edges here. So very simple. And again, this is a fashion item. It's not a workman's outfit. So very much the Van Assche is, of course, another Belgian. Very recent, only a few years old, this. And if in case you don't know, this is Jackson Pollock, one of his things in the Museum of Modern Art. Difficult to decide what you might feel about it, but you can see where the designer got his inspiration from. This is a bit sad to see a picture like this, because obviously this is a guided tour, which we're not allowed to do right now. But you can see the inspirations for clothes comes from many areas. Now I want to take you to the next theme, which is the peacock. Now, if you know a little bit about birds, you'll know the peacock has wonderful feathers and is much more beautiful than the peahen. So this is really, man is tired of wearing the dark colors and he wants to go back and be flamboyant and have lovely colors to wear. This is a rather fine suit by a designer, English designer called John Stephen. It's a little error here, please don't get that right. John Stephen, who was known as the £1 Million Mod, or the King of Carnaby Street, and who even set up his own fashion award in the 1960s. This is in red velvet with a cinched in waist and cleverly designed buttons. Now, the thing about John Stephen was that he had affordable fashion. This is the 60s, which I mentioned earlier. Affordable fashion means that you can earn £16 a week and you can spend £3 or £4 a week on an item of clothing, like a pair of trousers or maybe a jacket or something. So this gives you an idea. It was affordable. He had 3 shops at one time in Carnaby Street. Very much also, if you imagine the music, they're dedicated follower of fashion by the Kinks. That is very much John Stephen. Contemporary, of course, of Mary Quant. We're talking colour here, ladies and gentlemen. This is by Versace. Well, you can rely on the Italians for their flamboyance. We have here on this pair of briefs the traditional Greek key design and the Baroque style, these golden scrolls, which are quite amazing. But the interesting thing about this, Versace was sadly no longer with him. His fashion house is still doing very well. Now, I can appreciate that it isn't for everybody. This item might, of course, be worn for a much more select audience. But it does give me the opportunity to mention one extra interesting thing. Men's underwear used to be long johns or boxer shorts. But the jockey shorts, or the famous Y-fronts, were first sold in 1935, to everyone's delight. So there we show the undercover, and from the bottom, I think we should go to the top. So I've got here a rather wonderful example, two whimsical features of the bow tie. This company, Edmonds, has recently come into being. Bow ties, of course, were usually black or white. And because they were very understated, there comes a time when the color element comes back. So let's have a little look here at this one at the top. A lot of very buxom ladies, cleverly designed, all different hair colors, red, blonde, dark hair, and so on. So slightly cheeky. And this whimsical accessory, incidentally, is the hallmark of all sorts of people who make it their special interest. We have the Belgian musician Stromae. We have, of course, the fictional Belgian detective Hercule Poirot, played by Suchet. And, of course, the erstwhile Prime Minister of Belgium, Elio de Rupo, to mention just a few. So the bow tie is terribly important. It also has an interesting history because the bow tie was originally invented by the Croats. They were the people who fought for Louis XIV. And they had these open shirts, which in order to close them, they used to put a scarf and tie it round to keep themselves warm. So the bow tie is a development of that. Underneath, we have another patterned one. This is called Neptune. You can see the blue features. The interesting thing is if you wear a dark suit, this becomes very much a big feature and tends to set you apart from your friends. If you go into a shop in Brussels at the moment, the bow tie can cost you from 15 to 20 euros. These would retail at about 60 euros each. They're little artworks. And of course, we're keeping to the theme of color. We've got the waistcoat. Now these, notice, are much earlier. This is not a chronological exhibition. So we have the shawl effect, which is this soft folded hem. We have here woven fabric with bonded edges and neat little pockets. We have self-made buttons in the same down here, different patterns. Very often the only opportunity the Victorian man would have had would have for a little bit of colour would be the waistcoat. Now, the waistcoat also has some interesting stories. It's said that when Charles II of England came to take back his throne in 1660, he found the very long waistcoats which were worn uncomfortable and had it cut down. So he had his jacket, his coat, cut to fit his waist, and that is the origin of the waistcoat. So you have a look at these. There are various designs. There are many designs. They've merely been put all together so you can see the variety depending on your mood. And now we want to go to a completely different field. This section of the exhibition is very much emphasizing the modern man and features the professor from the Antwerp Art School, Walter van Beirendonck. He calls his designs for the Wilde and lethal trash, and that's the initials down here. So he ventures a series of shirts. So it looks in primarily a very simple shirt here with little epaulets on it, and it just says Brown Bear. Well, the Bears was a gay community in California, started in the 1970s. And Van Beirendonck is a tall guy. He also wears a beard and has a slightly rough, how shall I put this? Well, he's a big bearded guy, you know, like and therefore he would consider himself to be a bear. He also uses very unusual models to show off his designs in his catwalk shows. So big burly men, not the slender feet ones we've just seen earlier on. So this is one of the things he would feature. So the theme being men want to have fun, they want to go out, they're not restricted, and very much that style, and a lot of color is involved in this. That's a much more subdued one. We're talking about color here. Here we have another one of the t-shirt. This is, there we can see the Wilde and Lethal Trash label. It's using scenography, it's using strip cartoons, it's using adverts and logos. The brighter the better. Men want to have fun. We've had a little problem with this because, as you know, with the advent of AIDS, the idea of having too much fun was frowned upon, and there was a a backlash, which led to all sorts of changes in men's image to be more virile, more subdued, less open in their proclivities. But in fact, by the time we get to the 1990s and the wave is over and people are becoming a little bit more tolerant, then this emphasis on men having fun, having a good time, comes very much back into fashion. This is a very naughty one. I want you to look a little carefully. It looks like a plain blue t-shirt, but actually, if you look closely, it has an erect phallus here behind it, and a lollipop pattern on the front with a caption that corresponds. So you have to have a certain amount of audaciousness to wear such an item. But Van Beirendonck has a lot of very revolutionary ideas and is well known here in Belgium. Back to Jean-Paul Gaultier, and now this is a very different style. This is using almost op art on a shirt. I can only tell you that if you go to the exhibition and you look at this shirt, depending on where the light falls on it, it just looks like a striped, loose flowing striped shirt. The way this picture is taken, you can see it's superimposed with a male body with the six-pack and all the accoutrements one would expect, superimposed on the shirt. So it's a clever use of print and scenic design. Again, Jean-Paul Gaultier, who was very much a supporter of fight against AIDS, as we will see in a moment. I'll tell you how he got his inspiration for this one, probably from Vasari, who specialized as a grandfather of op art. This, in fact, is a flat painting, but it looks very much as if it's warped and swelling out. He developed these different forms of perspective. So patterns always look as if they keep changing depending on how you see them. So maybe art, once again, has influenced the designers. And the last one here on this section, again, by Gaultier. It's important that we can see it's quite clearly what's indicated here, safe sex forever. Jean-Paul Gaultier was an outspoken defender of safe sex because sadly he lost his partner, Francis, in 1990. And this is very much the social atmosphere, and the things that happened in the social mores of the time do reflect people's clothes. So although we have this easy care t-shirt, it is in fact very much like the kilt. It has a message, and it's important to bear that in mind because clothes tell you a lot about people. And now, the male nude. Well, we have here, of course, the emphasis on nudity. This is a designer, also a Belgian designer. We have here very interesting conflict of substances, not substances, but materials here. So we have this diaphanous loose cloak or coat, almost feminine and thing. It's transparent, so you can wear that. And of course, the black lambskin underwear and the binding round here, and in his hand he's wearing a sort of gold lasso with little crystals on it. So there's a very much idea, the homoerotic gaze again, and this is, as you can see, it's only last year's design. You have to remember that things keep changing and evolved, and so therefore there is now, with precautions and people behaving in a different way, it is all right to promote the male nude body. It was in fact Gaultier who first promoted bare backs for men, as well as dresses and various other things. So fashion evolves in a little way in keeping with what's happening in the world around us. Very interesting outfit, this. And we're coming now to the last section of the exhibition. A little bit, I'd like to go back and mention a couple of things here. We have obviously a tracksuit. The tracksuit and the hoodies have become popular events on the podium in the years 2000. It's a whole rethink of fashion and design. Here, this might tell you a little bit about the tracksuit as an item. Was designed in the 1930s for workmen to work in the refrigerated areas of storage warehouses in New York. could not even imagine it would turn up on a fashionable catwalk. Perfect garment, of course, for the lockdown in which we are subjected at the moment. It's an outsized garment. It's got the ribbing around the cuffs and feet, round here, round there, simple round neck. But what makes it a fashion item is that we have here this designer who has been influenced very much by streetwear. Streetwear would be the subcultures in the inner cities who would wear clothes maybe that didn't fit or that weren't very fashionable in themselves, but they have been taken over by the fashion designers. For example, Louis Vuitton, who is one of the oldest French fashion houses, took on a streetwear designer from California in 2018. So these garments here, with this particular one, I'd like to spend a little time explaining it to you. So we have here panels inset with these Baroque patterns and piping around the outside. Very comfortable, but not at all like the three-piece suit, or indeed like the very smart dandies we saw earlier in the exhibition. Here we have what we would have called perhaps something that you wouldn't see on a fashion show, and now becomes a terribly, terribly important item. These are commonplace now. If you look in the shops now, you will see a lot of clothes of this design, sometimes with the name of the maker, because of course one thing I didn't mention also, which is important, that nowadays this is the year, the millennials time, it's the year of labels, of social influencing, and you buy something because it's a Ralph Lauren or it was a Dior. But the first person to bring names into designs was Frederick Worth, who was, dare I say it, another Englishman who made his name in Paris and designed clothes for the Princess Eugenie. So this idea of labels, very important. This is definitely a time for labels and images and promoting styles which are more comfortable, because the young people now don't really want to be pigeonholed and boxed and put into certain categories. They want to wear what's comfortable, what they feel okay. They don't want to give the wrong message with their clothing. So things are becoming a little more unisex or binary, non-binary in style. So anyway, this here you see could be worn equally well by a man or a woman. How about some more shoes? Now we have a well-known fashion house, Balenciaga, who founded his fashion house in Spain, but moved to Paris at the time of the Spanish Civil War. Here we have a pair of what I would call sneakers. Interestingly, they've got a lot of bright colors. The name, of course, terribly important, is clearly indicated on the side here. It's very colorful again. We have yellow, blue, beige, black, and this interesting a connection of ribbons and the way that the thing is all put together. A masterpiece of clever shoe engineering, quite different from what we've seen from Mr. Beckenberg's a little earlier on. And these little sneakers here will set you back about 750 euros, because the name is very important. The thing about these, instead of the smart shoes you would have worn with a suit, now you have these sort of unisex outfits, and you also have the shoes that are very comfortable to go with them, which could be worn with a dress, with trousers, with jeans. In other words, they go with everything. I wonder how many of you don't have a pair. I imagine this is now a standard uniform. We're trying to get away from the idea of the three-piece suit and the uniform, but this is nonetheless a uniform of a different style. We go through now to one more item. And this is the example. This is also, I'm left with a Belgian designer. We have actually others in this section, this non-gender, non-binary section from America, Canada, Northern Ireland, and so on. But I picked this one because it's Belgian. It's called, it's a two-piece ensemble by a group called Mozart. That's M-O-S-A-E-R-T, not the musician. And it's the Belgian musician I mentioned earlier, Stromae, and his partner, Coralie Barbier, beg her pardon. And they designed this very interesting outfit. So we have little reminders of Art Nouveau with the blue and pink flowers, blue for boys, pink for girls. So that lives the ambiguity about it. Simple cuffs to keep it warm here. Could be worn by either gender. In fact, the idea of clothes which are of two different genders, male is what you wear, female is what females wear. This has become very blurred now, and there are a whole lot of labels like Uniqlo. I looked them up on the internet. I found 15 without any effort, who are resolutely emphasizing the fact that these are non-gender clothes. Even if you get a respectable, well-known series of department stores like Selfridges in London, or indeed Le Printemps in Paris, they have whole sections devoted to non-gender clothing. So this is very much the style of today, this more relaxed style, people not wanting to be pigeonholed and put into boxes and told how they should wear. And there are all sorts of codes which have been broken. So the idea being that although this is masculinity, as we said at the beginning, fashion is really involving everybody and all colors and all styles. And the whole purpose of this particular exhibition, which is a new thing for our particular magazine, particular museum, I beg its pardon, is to, we've had about 100 different items here, which have been either loaned by couturier, like the Rick Owens one, the white dress, or they have been donated to the museum, the young designers, for example, or they form a part of the museum's vast collections. Things are carefully kept museum. The exhibitions take place on an annual basis because, of course, fabrics are fragile and they have to be looked after and kept under temperature controlled conditions. So the whole point of this exhibition is to put the emphasis very much on the man in our lives and the way that costumes and clothes and styles reflect not only the period in which they are worn, but also the social ambiance at the time. So it's really a question of remembering what is very important, and do clothes design what we have to do, what is our best way of designing. What image do we wish to give? For example, in the exhibition, not shown to you today, but for your interest, there is a whole section on accessories with hats and signet rings, all sorts of briefcase I mentioned, various things which show different styles and different ways that men have of expressing their importance, their social standing, and things change. So the idea of the man in the three-piece suit is perhaps no longer so fashionable. I'm not sure we're going to get the man in the dress just yet, but you never know, because the Vogue, that very august publication, which is 132 years old, put a man in a dress on the front cover in its November issue. So things are beginning to change. And so it's really perhaps time to take the pressure off all these gender traditions and dynamics. So gender does not have to be defined by clothing. So I think there's something we can say here, which I'd like to end with a favorite quotation of mine by Oscar Wilde, who said that fashionable is what I wear, unfashionable is what other people wear. So I hope you've enjoyed this short little trip through this museum, which is on 3 floors and is open for your perusal and enjoyment until the 13th of June. And we hope to see you again. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you. I'd just like to end by saying we now have, if you have made any questions, we now will have a question and answer session. Our moderators, Remy, whom I forgot to thank, and Sylvie, who are doing all the clever stuff behind the scenes, have been checking out the questions. And if you've asked any questions, I will do my very best to answer them for you, or we can ask the curator of the exhibition. Does anyone have any questions? What was the last question? I want to go to the last one. How can't I do this? I can't go to the last one. Oh. Good. I see that I have a question here on the screen. When did men started wearing underwear? That's a good question. I actually did a bit of research on this. Originally, they used to wear loose clothing. They didn't wear much underwear. But the idea of fitted underwear would be, as I said, the 1930s, when people would wear this closer fitting underwear, like we showed you the briefs. But before that, it would be long johns, usually with buttons up the front or a side panel opening, no zips. So probably in the 19th century to wear proper men's underwear. Before that, it would be just loose tunics in the earlier times. I hope that's clear. We're right at the end of the exhibition. The recording will be put online on the YouTube channel under the Fashion and Lace Museum, and details of the address and so on are on your screen now. Oh, somebody's thanking me. That's always very nice. Thank you for listening. Sure, if we have any more questions here.